Welcome everybody to Booze Hour Community Edition today. Today I've got on David Wood, who is a super interesting guy, somebody I've actually known. I've realized after chatting with him, have actually known him since dating back to like 2005. So we can even retrace some of that during this chat here today. But really excited to have him on. Before I bring him on, a couple things. We have still a couple of these stickers left, Booze Hour live stream. So those are available to anybody that subscribes. I will pay for the stamp that gets this to you. So all you have to do is reach out to me. You can ping me on LinkedIn, on Twitter. You can email me, boo@f5.com, and just say hello, that you're a subscriber. I just need a mailing address from you, and I will throw these guys in the mail for you. A couple other things. If you're watching this via YouTube right now, then you'll want to hit the subscribe button down below here if you have not subscribed already. That way you will get all of the content shown in your subscription feed as it comes out. And there's a lot of content that comes out. On Mondays, we have a weekly show. On usually in the middle of the week, we have something that's a technical show as well, as far as a live stream. And then we also have something later in the week, although it's not always later in the week. We have something like this, the community edition, which is kind of featuring somebody and a cool story about them, as opposed to all the technical stuff that most of us deal with every day. So that's what today is about. A couple other notes here. There was a B-roll channel that I had called Booze Hour B-roll. That is going away. I was uploading clips onto there, short highlight clips from these videos, and I will just upload those to the main YouTube channel now. And that channel was actually, the intent of that was also a behind the scenes type look at some of the stuff that happens. And so some of that will actually move over to my personal YouTube, which is youtube.com/boolam. So you can see really fun stuff like me cooking with an air fryer and me unboxing a drone. Yes, that will be really cool to see. So if you want to, you can check that out. And then otherwise, anybody that is currently receiving the weekly newsletter directly emailed from Daryl right now, and this weekly newsletter contains a summary of all the stuff that we are up to as far as live streams and the show. We have technical updates from an F5 perspective. And then we also have a couple industry articles that we pick out that might be interesting for folks. We send that out every week. Daryl sends it out directly to everybody, but we are shifting the weekly newsletter to just being sent out via the website, darylandboo.com. So if you go over there, sign up with name and email address, that's it. And then you'll get that weekly technical newsletter. And I'm going to add more to that over time. The one that Daryl sends out on a weekly basis, will shift that to just being a monthly summary instead. And everybody needs to, if you want the weekly technical, you'll need to opt in on the website. Also on the website, if you just go to the site, there's going to be a tab, and I just did this last night. I just made a calendar of all of the live streams that are coming up, and I'll put on hopefully industry events and webinars that you might be interested in as well. I usually mention webinars in that weekly newsletter, so I'm going to put that into the event calendar on darylandboo.com. So something else to check out. All of that is more stuff that's more relevant to the Vancouver, British Columbia area as well. I know we have listeners and viewers that are outside of our territory, but most of that stuff is going to be more relevant to, or mostly relevant to, our local territory. So, one other thing, speaking of behind the scenes, next week, and I'll just mention this now, next week I'll have on Luke Lehman. He will be on the Monday weekly update, and he is a product manager with F5 Silverline, and so we'll have him on Monday, and we'll chat with him. You guys can get to know him from there. But also on Wednesday, I'll have him on Booze Hour Cloud Edition, the technical show. And on that one, we're actually going to do something a little bit different. It's going to be, because he's a product manager, he recently went through integrating the Shape Defense product with F5 Silverline. And we'll give you a behind the scenes, I'm calling it, how the sausage is made, look at what it takes to actually bring a product to market. I know, folks, when they encounter myself and Daryl, they see the finished product, but what are all the steps that it actually takes to bring something to market, and some of that stuff might be surprising to folks. All the stuff that's involved in there. It's not just somebody sitting in front of a computer and writing lines of code and then uploads it to downloads.f5.com. There's a lot of stuff that happens. So that'll be cool to watch. All right, with that, I will bring on David. Hey, David, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am doing really good. It's been a good week, and looking forward to closing it out.
Fantastic.
Yeah. How about yourself?
Good. Is there an echo going
on? I don't hear one on my side.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
If you have the YouTube tab open somewhere and you have this open, that might be something.
I don't think so. I just want to make sure that it's not being recorded that way. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, first off, I just wanted to thank you for inviting me on. I was kind of surprised that you would reach out to me on this.
It's great to have you on, and there's I'm still getting through who I think of as far as there's a lot of people that would be great to have on here, but there was a handful of people who I knew that it would be awesome to have them on, and I knew that you would be great to have on. So I've always had you in mind because of Kina. We'll talk about Kina today, but getting to know you more, because I know that you're a lot more than just the businesses that you operate and run and the shops that you work in, but there's a lot more that we'll dig into today that I think everybody will find interesting, and I'd love to just learn more about you as well. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you. Maybe we can kind of dive into how you got started career-wise, because you've actually, I can see from your career path, you've done a couple different things that have been pretty interesting, but maybe we can go through, where you went to school and what you did right after school.
Well, that's going back a few decades. So I'm, it's been a bit of a path for sure, like a bit of a circuitous path in terms of where I am today. I almost look at it in decades. Like the last decade has been really about social venture and in terms of how to bring that together. And the previous one was all about my charity, getting that off the ground. And so if I keep going back decade by decade, I'm not sure if this is going to be that interesting, but back in the early 70s, late 60s, I was living in Seattle and going to high school down there, and graduated early, like 72, I guess, but moved back to Canada. So around that time, I was doing that formulated a big part of who I am today. I was doing a lot of mountain climbing and really into the outdoors.
Okay.
And we moved back to Canada into the prairies, and I lost that connection. And that actually will bring me back to Kina. Like there is a connection point there further up. But then I in the 70s, I sort of wandered around. I did a bunch of different jobs, from driving truck to all kinds of different things, and then went back to school in technical school actually, BCIT, and then went into worked for a mechanical engineering firm. And then realized I need to get an engineering degree. So then I went back to engineering. And once I got into engineering, I realized there's much more to, there's this bigger world. And so I made a pivot into electrical engineering, and they had the first program, computer engineering at the time. So I raised my hand and said, I'm going for that. So I made a quick pivot away from mechanical engineering, consulting what I was doing before. And then, and back then computers were a little bit different than they are now. This was in the early days. We did Fortran programming with card decks, IBM card decks, computer programming with paper tape, a lot of mini computers, those kinds of things. This is back in the late 70s, early 80s. So anyways, so I got through that, and that sort of pushed me into the IT world. And I was in Calgary at the time, going to university, and that's how I started. That's how I moved into the IT world.
Oh, wow. So University of Calgary you graduated from eventually then?
I did, yeah, actually early 80s, yeah.
Oh, wow,
and
cool.
And then I started to work in oil and gas, a big oil and gas company, and that was really fascinating at the time. All kinds of technologies, mini computer, process control. I was doing process control work at gas plants and trying to tie in production control, data collection information into mini computer networks. And we were doing, the first Ethernet. We were doing all kinds of interesting work at the time, and mainframe, tying into mainframe backends, and a lot of integration work. And then I realized sort of in the late 80s that this is not really what I want to do. It was big corporate work. And I remember I was running a workshop in the late, God, when was that? Probably 89, I guess. And helping a group of people within this company, figure out their networking, their T1s, all their linkages into all the sites, and how all this was going to fit together, and with SNA and all the other networking components. And after the workshop, this guy came up to me and said, you should be a consultant. You can make a lot of money consulting. And sort of light bulbs just went off. I said, wow, I was really tired of doing the big corporate world and working my way up the ladder. So I shifted and I started my first company in the early 90s. And it was an IT technical infrastructure company, dealing with client server computing, all the networking aspects of that, the servers. And sort of got that was really my first big push into being an entrepreneur.
Wow. And so what type of clients were you working with? Still the same clients, but just from a consulting perspective?
Yeah, basically. And we did a lot of work with governments, some oil and gas at the time. But we, about a few years into it, we realized we're sort of this generalist IT organization that did all the glue, the client server work, and the Novell networks, and the mainframe connectivity, all those kinds of things. And we saw this thing coming. Internet was coming. The .com was sort of on the horizon, the .com boom, and then the year 2000 was looming there. So I knew a guy that had started an SAP consulting company, and he was doing really, really well out of Calgary, and they were doing the application implementation side of it. And whenever they would go into these big customers, they'd say, well, how do we get ready for this R3, this client server version of SAP? So he reached out to me and said, do you guys want to get into this? And we're going, well, we're doing all this other stuff, IT architectural activities and integration and designs. And we said, well, why don't we pivot and just focus everything on SAP? So we retrained everyone on SAP technical basis consulting, and that sort of launched us into that space, and it grew really quickly. We opened up offices across Canada with this other company. Wow. And and then we end up getting acquired by, we're beating everyone's pants on all the SAP implementations, the IBMs and the PwCs, and we're doing really, really well. And so PwC came and acquired us, the whole thing, and we became part of PwC at near the end of the 90s. Yeah. Wow.
So how, what was the size of the company at the time that you were acquired?
Well, there's probably 500 employees total. The technical side, my piece with my partner was we had about 75 to 80 technical consultants. Huh. And so again, we did all the sort of up to the application development, the space within SAP. Yeah, so it was a wild time. Things were really busy. We're doing amazingly big projects. But the interesting thing, that was back when I was looking at business. It was purely from a pure capitalist perspective. It was all about profit. It was purely about making money, and which is sort of a lot of companies still operate that way. And I'll talk more about that when it comes to Wirefire and how we made that shift. But there was a point in there where it was a bit of an awakening for me, and it formulated how I thought about business, particularly when we started Wirefire. And this company that it was a huge opportunity, a huge SAP implementation project. And it was out of Montreal, and it was for a tobacco company. And I'm going, wow, we really don't want to do this. This does not fit with our value set. And they said, well, come on out, just come and do the presentation and see what they think. And so we went out there and we did the I listened to the presentation of the SAP, application side, and it went really well. And at the end of the day, it was a 2-day set of presentations. And then at the end of the day, I went back to my hotel room. I just reeked the smoke. It was a wild environment. You go in there, there's smoking in the elevators, smoking in the cafeteria. You had ashtrays the size of hubcaps in the boardrooms, where we were doing presentations. It just didn't it didn't feel good. So I went back the next day and said, I really don't want this work. So we're here. I did my presentation, and I basically almost doubled our rates when I presented to them. I figured, okay, that'll be a showstopper. And they just looked at me and said, "Smile, great. When can you start?" And we and we basically so we sold our, so I sold our soul basically for profit. So that was about our company. It was really only about making money and growing. And so that was a really hard lesson for me to learn, and I learned that the hard way. And when I talk about Wirefire in the future in terms of the B Corp and the triple bottom line approach, profit, people, and planet, we would never ever do that kind of gig again. It just wouldn't happen.
It sounds like you were hard on yourself at the time. Were your views shared by partners and employees as well?
Some of the employees didn't really want to work there, but it was good work. It was like a huge scale SAP implementation, particularly technical, with the massive HP servers and networking components and what have you from our side. So it wasn't, again, it was just viewed as a job, and as viewed as, this is how businesses operate. This is how you make money. And again, it was really all about, and back then in the heydays, like people were making incredible amounts of money consulting as employees as well. The rates were, much, much higher than they even are today. And that was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago. So,
a lot of the previous guests on Community Edition have been entrepreneurs as well. And one thing you mentioned there is that you were able to outmaneuver a lot of the big shops during that time. Did that just come to being nimble, being able to move faster?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was definitely about being nimble. And in the 90s too, when I spun off from working for SO Resources at the time, when I spun off and started my company in 1990, there weren't a lot of small startups. They're mainly larger consulting organizations, like probably the next smallest one would be System House at the time, which is a fairly big organization. So there weren't a lot of these little boutique guys that were focusing on special areas. So we were able to assemble and provide a unique set of skills that the big guys just couldn't seem to wrap their minds around, and or compete maybe on price as well at the time. So yeah, so we sort of hit it at a good time. We're pretty lucky. Like I've always been lucky and being in the right place at the right time. And we're there for .com. We're there for the year 2000 boom. And we rode that wave up.
Yeah, well, a lot of people, define luck as when preparation meets opportunity, and especially on the technical stuff, you either have it or you don't. So it sounds like you had guys and girls that were trained and ready to go with the skill sets that were required at the time.
For sure, we definitely doubled down and invested in training for our staff. So from a B Corp perspective, or from doing the right thing for our staff, like we spent a lot of time and effort training people, and put the money in it and providing them the opportunity, for sure.
That's cool. Yeah. So eventually somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, we're going to write a check and get you out of this thing."
Yeah. So 1998, I guess. Yeah, I became a PwC card carrying employee and managed their national technical services. And I was supposed to be there for 5 years as part of the deal. I lasted till December 31st, 1999, and I realized I wanted to do something different. So I decided to take basically a decade off, and travel the world and have a different perspective on things. And I was in a unique, position. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I was pretty free. So I just basically, I took off traveling, and first year was pretty hedonistic, traveling all through Southeast Asia and Australia, diving. That's pretty well what I did for almost a year. And then I realized, okay, now I need to get back into something here, and I need to give something back. And that's when it sort of pulls me back to 1969. I'd created this list of 100 things I wanted to do in my life. And I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I folded it up. I carried it in my wallet wherever I went. And one of the top things on that list was, as a climber, climbing, Mount Rainier and Mount St. Helens before it blew up, and all the sort of the snow cones up and down the Cascades.
Wow.
And I always wanted to go to the Himalayas. So on my top of my list is climbing the Himalayas. I never went there. I'd never been there. So here I am, in my mid 40s. And so I said, okay, well, I'm gonna head off and do some, go to the Himalayas and do some volunteer work. And so I got hooked up with an organization that placed people into remote villages for 4 months and to teach in the local primary school. So I ended up in the mountains of the Himalayas, not too far from Mount Everest, and was teaching in a school. Yeah.
Wow. Like teaching English or a certain subject?
Yeah, mainly English, and but predominantly English, and it was a hard job. Yeah, it was a really hard job. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you spent your weekends climbing, I guess.
Well, I did a lot of trekking, back up, way up into the mountains, and I'd go off the beaten path, and where the tourists typically didn't go. And yeah, it was a fascinating. Yeah, I spent a lot of time there. So I went back and forth to Nepal, and around that time, that's when I was living in this little village called Charikarka, and the school I was teaching at was about an hour and a half walk straight up the hill. Into this little school above a town called. Actually, have you ever been to Nepal?
No.
No. Okay. Well, a lot of people, they have this dream they want to go, and go to Everest Base Camp or go up into that region. It's called the Khumbu region of Nepal. There's an airstrip that comes in there in a town called Lukla. It's one of the most dangerous airports in the world. Right. It's just a strip that drops off the side of the mountain, and so when I was there, it was gravel. They were trying to pave it. So we actually had to walk in about 5 or 6 days from another place to get up into there because the airport was kind of closed. But so when I was there, I was in the school, and they kept on telling me, or in this little village, living with this family, the Sherpa family, and everyone in the village was saying, "You got to meet this American kid, right? He lives in this village as well, and a tall American guy in his early 20s." And there's no other Westerners or Badeshis around in that area. And he had gone away for about a month, and he shows up one day. So we started talking and drinking Chang every night. Chang is their local home brew that they make. And so we drink Chang over smoky fires, and we start talking. And he had started an organization called Porters Progress, which is a human rights or labor rights organization to deal with the porters, the guys that carry with a basket and what they call the nomal and the doko, all the stuff up and down the Himalayas. And so he had created this organization to train them, provide better wages, teach them about AIDS prevention, English, high altitude, and create these clothing banks so that these guys could get clothes, right? But, so when they go up into the mountains, they're dressed properly with boots and what have you. So I was giving him a hand structuring out his nonprofit, and then he spoke perfectly Nepali, so he would come into the schools with me because they would beat the kids, right? So the teacher would walk around with these big sticks, and it just and they beat them over the head, they beat them over their bodies, and whenever they did anything, it didn't matter what they did. So I was trying to run workshops with the teachers to try and educate them to if you're going to beat them, at least beat them on the backside. Don't beat them on the head. And so I had this, we were having these workshops, and the teachers absolutely hated me. And this was, like the classic Westerner coming in and saying, I have all the answers, right? So this is my early day to try and understand about international development. And so it didn't go very well. Kids loved me, teachers hated me. And that was fine. So anyway, so then I started coming back to Canada during those days, doing fundraising for this organization, working with MEC, getting boots and clothing from Patagonia and shipping that over to the clothing bank for them. And I was back and forth between Nepal and Vancouver. And during that time, early in that time, I decided to, well, first off, the porters, these guys that carry basically they're the truckers in Nepal that carry the stuff up and down the mountains on the trails. They were mainly from low down in the sort of the middle hills, and they only do this. It's really, really hard work. They get paid nothing, but to basically to make something. So what I found out was that a lot of their kids, and when I was in the schools, every year, like grade 1 through 5, there's less and less girls. They'd be dropping out of school. So that's when I got the idea of, well, why don't we try and at least support some of these girls in school and keep them in school longer? And so we created a program called Porter's Daughters, and that was our first group. And we had, up to, I think, 20 girls at that time. And we did leadership training. We bring them into a center. We take them rock climbing. We, teach them how to vision about the future, where they could go with the possibilities. And then we provide them with educational support for their uniforms, their supplies, and, and food, so they could stay in school. So that was sort of the impetus. That's what started Kina back in 2002.
So they were dropping out of school to support families with work?
Yeah. Well, let me just fire up this presentation here. I've got a couple of slides that explain it better than I can possibly do. Okay. Let's see if I can get this to work here. Yeah, so there's sort of a blow up globe from the early days. So there's Nepal. Nepal, for those who don't know where Nepal is, it's sandwiched between the Tibetan plain of China, Tibet basically, and in India. It's a long, skinny country, low up to the Himalaya ridge, which are 8,000 meter peaks, and it's a pretty amazing country. So what we let me just go. Yeah, so we focused on girls at risk in the rural areas is what we do, not predominantly now. And I'll explain to you how we managed to bring my Wirefire, my IT company. I've always been struggling. How can I bring my IT business into the nonprofit world? How can we blend those two? And we just launched a really interesting program, our first one. I'll tell you about that in a second. So, but bottom line is, in a lot of the developing world, and particularly in Nepal, there's this arc. It's a really sad arc in the sense that the girls, if a family has a boy and like a brother and sister, and they're poor and they can only afford to keep one in school, they'll always keep the boy in school. Almost always is my experience. That's starting to change now a little bit over the last 20 years, but it's still an underlying theme. It's the gender bias. And you see that in India as well, in China, but it's pretty predominant in Nepal, and particularly in the rural communities and different ethnic subgroups. So by the time they're 10, 11, 12, they're pulled out of school like grade 5. They're back at home, working in the fields, working in the home, and they don't get the advanced education. And then typically they're married off early, 14, 15. Pregnant by the time they're 15, 16, raising a family, and and none of it's by their choice. It's been forced upon them. There's actually a saying in Nepal that I heard, and hopefully this is disappearing, but it's educating your daughters like fertilizing your neighbor's crops. Just let that sink in a little bit. It's because once the girl gets married, she goes to the other family, and she's not there to work on the farm or work in the community, work in the house, or support the parents as they get old. So it's a challenging thing. So anyway, so that's kind of the situation. So then what we've done is and it took us a while to get to this point, but we focus on basically just keeping girls in school as long as we can on that arc. They have a school system where they go to grade 10. That's like our high school, grade 12. Graduation, they have to write a national exam to get that grade 10. It used to be called school leaving certificate. Now it's called C. And then from there, then they can go into college, which is basically grade 11 and 12. And then if they're really lucky, they can go on to advanced technical training or university in Kathmandu. And then into jobs. So our job, so what we focused on, is bringing girls in around grade 5 and supporting them as far as they want to go on that educational arc. And that's basically what we do now. So our purpose, first off, Kina means why in Nepali. So Kina is our why, and our purpose, our why, is keeping girls in school. That's all we focus on, is whatever's necessary to keep them in school. So just to give you an idea, we're not very big. We're a small organization, always have been. I always thought we would have maybe 25 girls that we'll support constantly. And now we're up to about 100 girls and young women.
Simultaneously.
Simultaneously, yeah, at any one time. So they come and go. So for example, we have about 60 that are in grade 5 through university. And there's a lot of them in the villages. Some are now in Kathmandu. For example, we have this one young girl, which I'm really quite proud of. We found her or met her in this rural village that we're doing some support in. It's about a 3-day hike off the main trekking trail. and she was, her parents were dead. She was staying with a school teacher. She was really, really smart. One set of clothes. She had a crutch. She had a knee problem. So we brought her into the program. We met her and we brought her into her program to provide her support so she could stay in school up to grade 10. Then we found out that there's some abuse going on within that living situation. So we pulled her out of there and brought her into Kathmandu, put her into a girls' home that we have an association with, and where they support these, these girls right through to college. So we supported her on that track, and she did amazing well. She's blossomed, and we got her some surgery for her knee problem. She graduated from college, and now she's in our other program. She's now in law school.
Wow. Wow. That's just amazing.
Yeah. Still chokes me up.
Yeah. And is she, so how far along is she until she's graduated from that?
She was in her second year until COVID hit. So I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on there with COVID. So that's on the back burner. So, but she'll once schools open up, she'll just carry on. So she's doing quite well.
Wow.
Then we started. Yeah, pardon me.
It's just amazing to see. Things. Sometimes you like I've donated to Kina before. Not bragging, but I've donated before, and the idea that small differences that we can contribute to over here, if we can funnel it into the right things, you can make a big difference if it's in the right place.
Yeah. And again, like there's some amazing organizations out there doing great things, like, building schools and libraries and educational support for, tens of thousands of girls, young girls and boys at risk around the world. We never aspired to be that big and, to grow it to that size. We've been trying to we've always kept it, small and focused on just a handful of people that we can have direct contacts with. So, and I'll tell you a little bit about why it's small as well. So the other two cool things is we started a program in, I guess, 2011. So one of the things that we found in the first decade of doing this was that when they reach grade 10, there aren't any colleges in these small rural communities out in the hills, right? So the colleges are in more of the regional centers in each area. So we'd send them to college, but then we had to find a safe place for them to live. We had, to billet, families, and that was really problematic, as you can imagine, because they would expect them to work for them and do all kinds of other things. So one of our partner groups in country, it's called Small World, that we had been supporting through women's empowerment projects that we've run over the years, bringing sewing machines in, teaching communities how to sew clothes, make school uniforms, those kinds of things. So we're partners with them. And they came up with this idea. We said, why don't we, I can get some land donated. We'll build our girls' college hostel for 40 girls in this one major center, regional center. And so we said, well, okay, we don't really build stuff, but yeah, okay, this is great. That's a great idea. So we said, we'll help fund the construction of this facility. And then we'll provide educational, all the scholarships for all the 40 girls going forward, everything from uniforms to supplies to exams to tuition, all that kind of stuff. So in 2011 we built this with them, and it's a great facility. There's 7 dorm rooms that can have 6 to 7 girls in each one. On the ground floor up above is a kitchen, their own private kitchen and an eating area. And then we built a computer lab in the facility as well. I brought a bunch of computers in there in the early days, did some training on how to use Microsoft Word and Excel, those kinds of things. So that's been going since then. I got a cool picture that will describe that a little bit. So that was great. And there's some other things that happened in the meantime. In 2015, there's a massive earthquake. I'll tell you a little bit about in a second. Changed the course of Kina as well. And now we just launched a brand new program, which is what I was really trying to figure out, how to blend these two worlds together. My Wirefire, my IT company, and Kina. So what we've done is we've now launched a full stack software developer training program it's free for girls, for young women in Kathmandu. So we just launched that. I'll talk about that in a second. And then the other thing we do is we provide medical support, to keep them in school if they get sick and those kinds of things. Yeah.
Wow. So the developer training, is that in person,
I,
classroom based or online? Or?
I will show you that in a second. That was our big shift with COVID. Like you always have to be ready for these major life events. Like the earthquake, like the devastated Nepal in 2015, forced us to shift into a whole new direction. COVID did exactly the same thing as it has around the world. So our philosophy is small is big. Okay, as an organization, we're not trying to be this big, massive organization with massive overhead. Every cent we raise goes into all the programs. Any operational activities is covered by the directors of the company. It's a big financial commitment. When we bring a girl in, we're committed to keep them as far as you want to go on that educational arc, right into a job, career job as well. And obviously it has a big impact on the life of that girl and her family, because you train them, it's past generation as well. Like a lot of the mothers of these young girls that we bring in don't know how to read or write. So now their daughters now know how to read and write. So they'll make sure their kids go to higher levels of education, and it just sort of pays it forward. So that's part of the big part of what we do. So it's also our philosophy is slow is fast. Okay, so it's a 5 to 10 year educational arc. It's not like building a school or facility, where you go in, we've done that, and we'll probably continue to do projects like that. But you build it, it's done. Turn the key, you hand it over, and it's done. This, you bring a girl in, or a young woman. It's a long arc. It's a long process. You just can't support them for a year and walk away. It doesn't. You're not getting the benefit for them. So. And there's been all kinds of studies about how important an education is. It's the fastest way to, and it's slow, but it's the fastest way to fight against poverty. It's just through pure education.
I was going to say that this has got to have really lasting effects on their towns, on the country. The more of this that can happen out there.
And the good thing is, like, we started 20 years ago, and things have changed in Nepal. There's more and more girls and young women going to school. There's other dynamics in there too, with a lot of the young men are leaving. We're leaving the country to work in the Middle East and overseas to make money for the family. So that ironically has left opportunity for young women.
That's cool too, that their education can take them to different spots, and they're very much valued in other parts of the world as well.
Exactly. So one of the key things that I was always trying to do is get technology involved. So into Kina and our programs, and try and get some of these young girls and young women into IT and become part of the global IT workforce, if you will. So a couple of years ago, I was, we've always had these projects that are undercover in terms of developing something called Kina Connect, which is going to tie in, SMS text messaging to all these, girls across the country, but they never really took off. So I started to look around Kathmandu to see who who's inspirational in this space. So I met this young woman on the right. Her name is Regina. And she had won an award, a software development award, for she won it was an American company who awarded it. She won $5,000 US with a trip to the US to go visit Microsoft and Google, and she did that, and they offered her a job, and she could immigrate into the US, etc. And she turned it down. She said, "No, I'm going to go back, and then I'm going to start an organization called Girls in Technology in Kathmandu to help young women in my country." So that's what she did. She went back and she started with this girl and this young woman in the middle, Asa Sharma, and they started this amazing network of young women. And they'd have meetups, and they bring in speakers. And they had like 50 to 75 of these young women in Kathmandu get together and talk technology. And it was a really great idea. So so that's how I found Regina. I said, "Well, would you guys consider partnering and helping me develop a training program for young women that Kina sponsored?" And so Regina, at the time, she was doing some development with her brother. She got married and raising a family. She didn't want to be part of that, so she stepped away, and she's sort of an affiliate now. And Asa was working as doing blockchain research for an IT company in Kathmandu.
Huh.
In Kathmandu, it's like a little mini India now. It's starting to rise up. There's all kinds of IT companies starting to blossom there, and they're doing offshore development and doing all kinds of cool stuff there. But it's mainly men. There's very few women, in that ecosystem. So Asa wanted to start her own company. So I said, okay, well, here's what I'll do. I'll help you start your own company. I'll mentor you. We'll get it set up, your web development. But one of your first projects in this company is you're going to be a partner at Kina, and we're going to develop a training center so we can train these young women. So she said, perfect, let's do it. So we went through. We found this. We found a location. We renovated it all out, created an office space for her company, and then we built out the training center. All new furniture, internet connectivity, the screens, the monitors, all that kind of good stuff. And spent a fair amount of money getting this going and getting it up and running. And so we had a trainer. There's going to be a 6-month development, full stack development training program. And at the time when I was doing this, I had a side company, part of Wirefire, that did ServiceNow consulting. So we're going to do ServiceNow development training as part of that, because ServiceNow is just taken off like leaps and bounds. In the meantime, we sold that off to KPMG a few months ago. So I'm not allowed to be part of the ServiceNow ecosystem anymore. So we focused it down purely to full stack development. So now it's down to 3 months. And we're going to kick off the very first training April 1st. Well, COVID hit, and they went into draconian lockdown. So no one could go out of their house, except for to get food for like an hour a day. There's fines. There's all, it's loosened up a little bit, but they're still really, really tight. So what do? We have this brand new facility. We had all these girls vetted, and they signed on. They're all ready to go. And so we had to cancel it. So we started to think, well, what are we going to do? So let's pivot. So we ended up it's worked out even better. So now it's all online. It's on Zoom. We have a Zoom platform. We were able to bring in more young women into the program. We launched it June 21st, the first 3-month program, and it's ticking along. It's 6 days a week, 5 days of online. 3 hours of after hours assignments and project work, and it's going great. So no, they're in their JavaScript phase right now. We've gotten 5 part-time developers who work for other IT companies who are really keen and really engaged, and they're doing the training for us on all the various modules as we go through. And so I'm really excited. And Asa, she's been a rock star in terms of organizing this and bringing it all together.
Oh, wow. So, and so are those trainers local, or are they from?
No, they're local, because one of my beliefs is everything should be local. Everyone involved in Kina is Nepali. And anybody we pay is Nepali. We don't pay foreigners. We don't need foreigners. They got really talented, smart people. They don't need, so we're just providing the grease and the capability to push this forward and some of the ideas, and they run with it. So
wow.
It's been fantastic. So that's really exciting. So this is going to be our first 3-month kick at it. And then ideally what I like to do is our next one's going to start in November for another 3 months. And then in the meantime, I'd love to be able to do cybersecurity training as part of this, and maybe one of the modules, and we can expand it out. And now with Zoom, we can expand it out to a larger audience than our restricted physical training center. So in hindsight, it worked out even better for us.
That forced you to scale and digitize, I guess.
In a way, absolutely, yeah. And internet and power is a big problem there. So sometimes the internet's down in a particular area of town, or your internet's down. But we record all the sessions, so when they get connected back in, then they can go through the recorded session for that day and carry on. So we've adapted to some of the fragility of the infrastructure in Nepal.
That's really cool. I mean, do you ever find challenges culturally with, say, parents or other men out there that don't think that something like this should happen?
Yes and no. Particularly in the rural communities, it was always there's always questions of why should they go to college, for example. Bring them into our college, hostel and go into a 2-year program. So there's always some pushback on that because they should be at home working in the field. So that's always been a bit of a challenge. A good example here is I was talking about girls in technology. So Regina and NASA had created this organization, and it got actually taken over by a man and in the country about last year. So they backed away from it, but there's an international group called Girls in Tech that has regional chapters. So they a Girls in Tech chapter just recently got spun up earlier this year, and it's being driven by a man, but he's brought in like Asa is now a director on Girls in Tech versus Girls in Technology, and they have this amazing group of people and men driving this for young women in Nepal. So yes and no, but it's still a challenge there. There's like 10% females in tech in Nepal.
Well, so it's changing over time with efforts like this. This is awesome to see.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So what's really cool about this too, I'm kind of excited about it, but we have there's some IT companies now that are hearing about this, and they're looking now they want to hire these young women when they finish this program, because there isn't this kind of training available in Nepal, or it's very difficult to get into if they do have it. So I think this is gonna allow these young women to get meaningful jobs pretty quickly. So it's pretty exciting.
That's awesome. This very cool.
Yeah.
Does that kind of tie back from here back into Wirefire? Is there some more stuff on touch on?
I can talk a little more about that later, but why don't I talk about Wirefire just for a second? So Wirefire, we started at Craig Showmat, my partner Craig Showmat and myself started in 2013, and so this sort of ties back to my experience in the 1990s with my other company, InfoEdge. And so what I wanted to do is to start a company that was not just about making money, right? Let's take a look at the slide here. We want to frame it and base it in the idea of the triple bottom line. So there's some papers and some research that was done back in the 90s. I can't remember the guy's name. I remember reading a paper about it on my travels, and it really spoke to me. And it's about looking at a for-profit company from 3 different dimensions: profit, people, and planet. And there's a lot of companies out there that have corporate social responsibility guidelines, really good stuff. It sort of embodies some of these ideas. But the trick here was, how do you run a company that's not that it's profit and people and planet? So you look at every decision through those 3 lenses, and bring together in terms of how you decide which projects do you do, how do you run your business, how do you operate, who are your suppliers, who are your customers, and try and understand it from those 3 perspectives. So that's how we started. The company was based on this triple bottom line approach. So we're going along, so that sounds good in principle. So we're going along for a few years, and we're doing okay. We're in fact, we're growing very quickly from a services perspective. We're doing advanced networking in the early days, then we expanded into IT, OT, cybersecurity connectivity, layered on top of advanced networking, and things were going really well. But after a couple of years, we realized, well, how do we embed it into everything that we do? And that's when I'd heard about B Corp through some other organization. There's, B Corp's been around for a while, probably since I think around 2005, 2007. And it's a certification that's administered by a group out of the States called B Labs. It's a nonprofit, and it's a pretty rigorous process to go through to get certified. And I'd heard about a couple of other companies in Vancouver that you may know, obviously, like Hootsuite was an early B Corp, and an earlier B Corp was a company called Traction on Demand, which is probably out of Burnaby, which is probably the most successful Salesforce consulting company in North America, if not the world. They've been incredible, and they're really embraced, the idea of B Corp and business as a force for good. They're amazing. So those guys were, like looking at what they were doing and what they had done, as well as other companies like Patagonia and other big companies. I figured, well, why don't we try this process? And you can go online, you can test your company. There's a to score yourself, and it takes only a few hours. And what they found was most companies get, so through their different metrics and ways of looking at your company, from governance to your customers to your staff, there's all kinds of ways of looking at your company and measuring it from those three dimensions. You can get a maximum of 200 points. You need 80 to get certified, and 80 is really hard to get. So we ran through it and we got like 60 points. We went, oh man, we thought we were better than that. We thought we were in really good shape. We're doing all the right stuff. And so we tried to get serious about it. And our COO at the time, Gabriella Pisano, she just latched onto this and drove it. It took us 18 months going through all our various business processes, our hiring, our diversity, charitable giving, right down to changing our corporate legal entity in terms of changing our articles of incorporation to embed it, because really the fundamental drive around B Corp is to take it from a true business. It's all about shareholder value, driving up, more and more money for the shareholders. Well, B Corp is really about stakeholder value, driving it down beyond just the shareholders. It's, your employees, your customers, your community, having an impact on how you operate from a social perspective, but also an environmental impact perspective. So to make a long story short, we spent a lot of time and money and effort and changed how we did things. And our first time out of the gate, I want to say, first time we actually go in and we bring them in and we get certified, because they come in, they look at everything. I want to make sure we pass. So we got 88 points the first time. So I was pretty happy. There are a number of companies that are 100, 110, but this is a journey, right? So the next time, every 3 years, you have to get recertified. So the next time you have to get more points. And so you have to keep improving. You have to keep pushing forward. So it's a pretty exciting journey, actually. So yeah.
Wow, that's pretty neat.
And the fascinating part too is a lot of our staff are, especially our younger staff, millennials, they just love it. It really speaks to them that we're actually doing things. So an example is a really trivial example, but it's meaningful to our employees, is we give everyone a minimum of 4 weeks holidays when they start. And then we give everyone an extra week of paid holiday if they volunteer. If they want to go off and do, Habitat for Humanity, or go to Guatemala and build a house or a school, we'll pay for their full salary for that week that they go. So it's those kinds of things that we embed into our into how we run our business, and a lot of our staff just love that. So it's good business. It's good business.
Most of the staff take you up on that then, that 1 week of volunteering?
Surprisingly, not everyone. I would have thought everyone would have jumped at it, but every year there's a couple of people who do it for sure. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. So that's so when you talk about being a good business, like there's being good or a good organization. Like a for-profit business in the end is to stay in business, and you provide a service or a product, and being good is, the way I see it anyways, is how you actually do your business, socially. And so we're trying to look at, how do we measure that, right? So our vision it's pretty simple, but it's almost unattainable, but it's to be an elite technology service company that has a global reach, but contributes to a better world in everything we do. So we have this motto that we've had in place since the beginning called, it's good people doing good work for good companies. And then we define each one of those by Wirefire and also by our company. And so it's, we have it in everything that we do. We measure it out. And then we're trying to measure the project work so that we can identify, is this a good project we should be working on? Profit-wise, our people, as well as the environment. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Okay. So that's sort of Wirefire. And
So we've got a couple minutes left here. What I think we could spend a bit of time on is, how did people help you with Kina? You know, obviously monetary is something that you can do straight from the website, but you know, what are ways that other people contribute?
So like there's, yeah, exactly. Like there's, you know, monetary is always the easiest way, you know, in terms of donations. So we, the way we raise money is, you know, is through foundations, through other businesses where they provide, you know, we're a charity. We've been a registered charity since 2003, I think, too. So we raise money through that, directly through, for example, after the earthquake in 2015, I was, myself and my stepson, we're getting ready to hop on a plane to go to Nepal, and we had an earthquake, 7.8, you know, 10,000 people died, 25,000 people injured, you know, hundreds of thousands of people homeless, and you know, it's devastating. So they shut, you know, we were told not to come. We waited a few days and we said, no, we have to go. So we hopped on a plane, we went over there, and we shifted our focus to providing aid. So we went and bought like 6,000 kilograms of rice and dal, and we rented a big flatbed 4x4 truck, and we went up to the mountains to deliver to various villages. So we did that for a few days, and we were off into another village where we're delivering tarps. And this is during a crisis when, you know, trying to get these supplies was hard enough, but we're putting all our money and effort into immediate aid. We got caught in the second earthquake, which was at 7.3. We're often at the epicenter, and it was crazy. And yeah, anyways, that's a whole different story over beer. But so then but then Kina, then we came back a few weeks later and we started doing fundraising. So we started to build temporary schools, the ones that had all been destroyed. A lot of them have been destroyed. You know, construction over there was pretty bad. It still is pretty bad. So immediately we built temporary shelters for schools because monsoon was coming, so they could at least carry on through the school. And then I started a fundraising program to build schools, to rebuild schools, earthquake-resistant based schools in the region where we do a lot of, you know, even though we don't build stuff, this was an unusual time. So we went and we partnered with a local foundation called Compassion Eye Foundation, and they stepped up and provided all kinds of funding to help us rebuild a number of the schools. And then we had Wirefire and other companies, you know, chip in, and then friends and family and people like yourself who donated online. This all goes into how we raise money, and money is the easiest way to make a difference. We've had people who want to go over there and volunteer, but volunteerism, and travel, it don't always work well. To me, it takes away from local people, who could be building, who could be paid to, to do that work, versus a foreign person coming in and taking work away from a local person. So I'm always torn by that. But but we do send people over to work in the hostel and teach English and computer skills and things like that periodically. But we're too small. We don't have this big, huge infrastructure, administrative infrastructure. So it's really about raising funds. Yeah. So that's
Cool.
That's really the best way. Yeah.
So getting the word out, and then any donations right on the website. I believe there's a money or there's a dollar sign there.
If you go, go to Kina.org, and there's a little button will take you to our website and as little or as much as you want. You can do it on a regular basis, and we have some really good support out there. So I appreciate it. And again, I really appreciate the time to come here and talk with you. These conversations that you're putting forward, technical as well as community-based, are really well done, and I really appreciate having this opportunity to be a part of it.
Well, thank you. Like, I really appreciate you coming on. I know you had to think about it before you wanted to come on a live stream, but I'm so glad you did. And I got to say, like, I was already inspired by the stuff that you were doing with Kina. And when you would talk about it, you could tell how passionate you are about it. But like after today, I'm even more fired up. And I know that, I want to do more in the world to make my impact, and listening to people like you is something that's going to drive me further in that.
Yeah, Boo. Like I just want to sort of end up on, like, doing good is it's a personal thing, whatever that means to you, what corporate, charity, it needs to speak to you. So everyone has their own thing that they want to, get involved in. This is my thing, and it's not everyone's thing, right? And I totally get that. So all you need to do is find that thing that you can drive your passion into and do good in the world. I think that's all we can all aspire to. So
I don't think we can close it off any better than that. Thank you, David Wood. That was awesome to have you on. I will remind everyone, if you haven't subscribed, hit subscribe. It's below David's icon over there. And then, tune in next week. We'll have some more conversations with technical folk, but also with, on Friday, we'll have a community edition. I didn't mention this before, but with Alaji from former Scalar and C2W, but just talking through his career progression. So hopefully more conversations that will inspire folks to do good. All right. Fantastic. Thanks for coming on, David.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Have a good weekend.
You too. Thanks for checking this out today. If you're watching via YouTube right now, go ahead and click subscribe down below. Also click the bell for notifications. That way you will find out when we are dropping a new video or when we're going live. Also, there's darylandboo.com. If you head over to that, leave your name and email address, we will drop a weekly technical newsletter in your inbox every Monday. Also, this is available via podcast, Apple, Google, Spotify. Head over to one of those, hit subscribe, and you'll be able to listen to us in the car on your commute or during a walk or a run. Thank you very much, and we will see you next time.